The news broke like a thunderclap across the Commonwealth. The Australian Prime Minister had denied a security request from none other than Prince Harry and Meghan Markle during their second visit to the country. At first glance, it might sound like a routine political decision, bureaucracy in action, a matter of protocol, perhaps even budgetary concerns. But the reality was far more explosive. This wasn't just another government decision. This was a public snub of one of the most high-profile couples in the world, a moment that rippled across media channels, social platforms, and dinner table conversations alike. Imagine being in Harry and Meghan's shoes, returning to a country you've visited before, expecting the world to greet you with some level of understanding, and instead finding yourself facing outright resistance at the highest political levels. How does that feel? To be rejected not for who you are, but for the protection you are entitled to simply by virtue of being a royal under threat? The tension here is thick enough to cut with a knife. But before we continue, please subscribe and turn on the notification bell for updates. The story begins before the visit even happened. Behind closed doors, plans were meticulously drafted. Harry and Meghan, aware of the scrutiny they would face, had requested additional security measures, fully anticipating the glare of cameras, the throngs of fans and critics, and, importantly, the potential threats that come with being constantly in the public eye. Security is not a luxury for them, it is a necessity. And yet, what they received in response was a blunt, almost shocking dismissal. The phrase "you lie" was reportedly invoked in the conversation with the Prime Minister, leaving aides and insiders bewildered. This is the kind of statement that carries layers of meaning. On one level, it's a direct confrontation. On another, it's a political maneuver. On yet another, it signals a fracture in how the couple is perceived in global politics. The mere utterance of those words sparked outrage, disbelief, and endless speculation. Why would the leader of a major country confront the Duke and Duchess of Sussex in this way? And what does this mean for the monarchy, international diplomacy, and the personal safety of the royal couple? To truly grasp the significance of this incident, it helps to rewind to Harry and Meghan's first visit to Australia. That trip had been a whirlwind, characterized by a combination of adoration and scrutiny. Fans had lined the streets, waving flags, cheering, and capturing every moment on their phones. The media, as ever, had been relentless. Headlines alternated between admiration and controversy, with some outlets portraying the couple as modern, forward-thinking royals, while others questioned their motives and criticized their behavior. Security during that visit had been tight, coordinated, and under constant review. But even then, moments of danger had surfaced. There were instances of aggressive paparazzi, overzealous fans, and individuals who took it upon themselves to push boundaries. Every moment outside the controlled environment carried risk. It was clear that Australia, for all its charm and welcoming nature, was also a pressure cooker for royals under public scrutiny. Fast forward to the second visit, and the dynamics had shifted. The couple had expected a smoother, more coordinated experience, informed by lessons learned from their first trip. But what they encountered instead was a labyrinth of political hesitation, public opinion calculations, and, ultimately, an outright denial of their security requests. It was not simply an administrative no. It was a statement. And in the world of international relations, words carry weight. A denial of security implies vulnerability. It implies exposure. It implies that, at least in this context, the couple's protection is negotiable. A dangerous notion for two people who live with constant attention and, at times, threats to their personal safety. One cannot underestimate the emotional impact of such a denial. To be told, in effect, that your safety is secondary to political optics, to national perception, is both a professional and deeply personal affront. What makes this incident even more intriguing is the timing. In the age of social media, news travels instantaneously. A single word, a single phrase, can ignite global conversation within minutes. The Prime Minister's response, or refusal, did not exist in a vacuum. It intersected with ongoing debates about monarchy, celebrity, privilege, and accountability. It intersected with discussions on media intrusion, political responsibility, and personal security. And, perhaps most importantly, it intersected with public perception. Australians, Brits, and the international audience watched, analyzed, and formed opinions almost in real time. Some saw the PM's decision as a brave stand against royal entitlement. Others saw it as an unnecessary affront, a political misstep that endangered lives. And then there were those who simply wanted to know, what happens next? How do you navigate diplomacy, personal safety, and public opinion when the stakes are this high? Let's consider the human element for a moment. Prince Harry is not just a public figure. He is someone shaped by personal loss, by a constant sense of vigilance cultivated since childhood. Meghan Markle is not just a duchess. She is a woman who has navigated the dual pressures of celebrity and royalty, confronting challenges both expected and unimaginable. Together, they are a team, yet they are also individuals facing intense scrutiny at every turn. To be denied security in a foreign country is not merely inconvenient. It is deeply unsettling. It forces a recalibration of trust, a questioning of how and where protection can be guaranteed. For those who have not lived this life, it's hard to imagine the layers of stress, the mental calculations required, the ever-present awareness of potential danger. Every handshake, every public appearance, every media photograph carries risk, and yet these risks must be managed carefully with the cooperation of the host nation. When that cooperation falters, the consequences are immediate, tangible, and frightening. And yet, in the midst of this political and security maelstrom, there is the question of narrative control. How do stories like this get told? How are they framed in the media? How do royal aides, political advisors, and journalists shape the public's understanding? Every word matters. Every leak, every official statement, every interview adds layers of complexity. For Harry and Meghan, managing perception is not about vanity. It is about survival, both personally and institutionally. The denial from the Prime Minister introduced a narrative twist, a confrontation that media outlets quickly amplified. Headlines became sharper, tweets became fiercer, and the global conversation turned to speculation. Was this a political move, a personal snub, or both? And perhaps more importantly, what would the couple do next? This story also raises questions about the role of governments in protecting individuals under public threat. When does political calculation override human safety? When does the optics of a decision outweigh the responsibility to provide protection? In Australia's case, the Prime Minister's decision was calculated, public, and confrontational. The words, "you lie," carry with them the weight of authority, judgment, and challenge. But for the people involved, the royal couple, their security detail, their aides, the statement was more than words. It was a barrier, an obstacle, a test of patience, resilience, and strategy. And for the international audience watching, it became a lesson in the intersection of celebrity, politics, and security, all under the unforgiving glare of global attention. And so we arrive at the tension that will drive this story forward. The juxtaposition of personal safety against political maneuvering, the clash of royal expectation with governmental authority, and the human dimension of two individuals navigating a minefield of international scrutiny. The stakes are extraordinarily high, the players are extraordinary, and the consequences are immediate. Every decision, every interaction, every statement reverberates far beyond the room in which it was made. What happens when a prime minister challenges the security needs of a royal couple? What happens when media, politics, and public opinion collide? And what happens when the very people who are supposed to protect you become the source of confrontation? As we delve deeper into this story, we will uncover the events that unfolded before, during, and after the second visit. We will examine the first visit for context, explore the communications and confrontations behind closed doors, analyze media coverage and public opinion, and reveal the emotional and strategic calculations made by everyone involved. We will also consider the broader implications for the monarchy, for international diplomacy, and for how we, as a global audience, perceive those in positions of power and vulnerability. And through it all, one question remains at the center. What comes next for Harry and Meghan in a world that seems determined to challenge them at every turn? By the end of this exploration, you will not only understand what happened in Australia, but also why it matters so profoundly. You will see the intricate dance of politics, security, and media scrutiny that surrounds the royal couple, and you will confront the human realities behind headlines and sound bites. And just when you think you have the story figured out, we will reveal the next development. A twist that nobody saw coming, a revelation that changes everything, and a cliffhanger that sets the stage for the chapters to follow. The journey begins here, and what comes next will be more shocking, more revealing, and more intense than you could possibly imagine. But before we get to the heart of the controversy, we need to step back and understand the origins of this royal political storm. The first visit, the background of the relationship between the royals and Australia, and the initial warning signs that hinted at conflict. Because if you think this is just another celebrity drama, you are about to discover just how high the stakes really are, and why every word, every action, every decision matters more than you can possibly imagine. The request seemed straightforward at first. A simple, formal message sent through proper channels. We are requesting additional security support for our upcoming visit. On paper, it was nothing extraordinary, a routine communication between visiting dignitaries and the host government. But for Prince Harry and Meghan Markle, this request carried weight far beyond bureaucratic norms. They were not merely asking for protection, they were asking for assurance. Assurance that their safety, their very presence in Australia, would not be jeopardized by a lack of preparation, political hesitancy, or misjudged protocol. And yet, what unfolded in the days that followed would transform a simple request into a global controversy, setting the stage for a political confrontation that no one saw coming. Imagine for a moment the perspective of Harry. Born into the royal family, raised under scrutiny, and shaped by personal loss and public expectation, he had learned early that security was not just a matter of convenience. It was a matter of life and death. From childhood lessons about the dangers of crowds to adult experiences navigating the threats of media intrusion and overzealous fans, Harry understood the stakes intimately. Meghan, meanwhile, had experienced her own form of public scrutiny, first as a television star and later as a royal under relentless observation. Together, they knew the intensity of the spotlight they were stepping into. Their request for additional security wasn't overcautious. It was necessary, grounded in both experience and risk assessment. The initial communication, however, was met with unexpected resistance. Instead of an immediate acknowledgement or a confirmation of support, the request bounced around bureaucratic channels, analyzed for political ramifications rather than urgent necessity. Aides and advisors within both the royal household and the Australian government quickly realized that what might have been a routine approval was anything but routine. There were layers of consideration: public opinion, media perception, fiscal responsibility, and political optics. For the Prime Minister, agreeing to the request meant making a statement that could be interpreted as favoritism, preferential treatment, or even an endorsement of celebrity entitlement. Declining it, or delaying it, allowed for a different message to be sent: that no one, not even royals, was above scrutiny or the rules of the state. But the refusal, when it came, was not communicated with subtlety. Reports suggest that the phrase "you lie" emerged in a tense exchange between the Prime Minister and royal aides. It's a phrase that strikes like a hammer, blunt, confrontational, and laden with accusation. For Harry and Meghan, it was shocking. The very idea that a political leader would confront them with such direct hostility over a matter of personal safety was almost unfathomable. The emotional toll was immediate. For aides tasked with facilitating the visit, it created panic, confusion, and an urgent scramble to determine how to protect the couple under unprecedented circumstances. What makes this episode so compelling is not just the words themselves, but the context in which they were delivered. Harry and Meghan were already navigating a complex landscape. The ongoing fallout from past royal engagements, scrutiny over their previous visit to Australia, and the ever-present media frenzy that amplified every gesture and statement. Security considerations in such an environment are not theoretical. They are immediate, practical, and essential. Denying or delaying additional support is more than a bureaucratic hiccup. It is a breach of trust, a challenge to the very notion of safety, and an affront to the people being protected. The timing of the request also intensified the situation. The couple was preparing for a visit that promised high visibility, involving public events, official meetings, and interactions with fans and media alike. Each engagement carried potential risks, from enthusiastic crowds to unpredictable encounters with individuals seeking attention, or worse. Every step required meticulous planning, coordination with local authorities, and constant vigilance. The denial of enhanced security, therefore, did more than just complicate logistics. It increased the probability of incidents, heightened stress levels, and forced the royal household to rethink contingency plans in real time. There's an additional layer to consider: the optics. Harry and Meghan, unlike most dignitaries, are symbols. Their actions, movements, and statements are scrutinized not only by the public, but also by governments, media, and international observers. A request for security, therefore, is not a private matter. It is a public signal, a statement about perceived threats, and an insight into the pressures of their life. When that request was challenged, it sent waves beyond the immediate parties involved. Media outlets seized upon the confrontation, interpreting it through various lenses. Some as evidence of political overreach, others as proof of the couple's controversial status, and still others as an unfolding drama between monarchy and state. From a psychological perspective, the impact on the couple cannot be overstated. Harry, in particular, has a history of trauma related to loss, media intrusion, and security failures. Being denied protective measures in a foreign country triggered a mixture of fear, frustration, and disbelief. Meghan, too, faced the emotional strain of navigating a hostile political response while maintaining public composure. The situation forced them into a heightened state of alert, where every decision became tactical, every public appearance required additional calculation, and every conversation carried unspoken implications. It's also worth noting that the request itself was not extreme. The couple sought measures proportional to the known risks. Additional personnel, controlled access to venues, and coordination with local law enforcement to ensure predictable and safe movement throughout their itinerary. These are standard practices for high-profile figures, particularly those who have experienced prior threats. Yet the response they received suggested a refusal grounded less in practicality than in political calculation. It's a stark illustration of how governance, public perception, and celebrity intersect and sometimes collide in ways that can have real-world consequences. One cannot ignore the role of the royal aides in this episode. Tasked with balancing the needs of the couple with the constraints imposed by a foreign government, they became intermediaries in a tense negotiation. Their communications reveal a careful, methodical approach to advocacy, emphasizing both the risks and the necessity of support. They had to persuade decision-makers who were weighing optics, reputation, and political fallout against the undeniable need for protection. The tension between safety and politics was palpable, creating a scenario rife with anxiety, strategic maneuvering, and the looming threat of public controversy. For the Australian government, the situation was a delicate balancing act. Approving the request risked backlash from citizens and political opponents who might perceive it as favoritism or an undue allocation of resources. Denying it, however, risked international scrutiny, criticism from the media, and, crucially, potential endangerment of two high-profile figures. The stakes were extraordinary, and the decisions made, or withheld, would reverberate long after the visit concluded. Even as the request was formally denied, the ripple effects were immediate. Social media erupted with speculation, news outlets scrambled to interpret the incident, and commentators weighed in on the implications for royal protocol, government authority, and international relations. The denial became more than a policy decision. It became a story, a narrative that the public could digest, debate, and dissect. And as the news spread, the sense of tension and urgency around the visit only intensified. Through it all, one question loomed large. Why? Why would a government refuse the request for additional security for individuals whose safety was demonstrably at risk? Was it a matter of principle, a political calculation, or something more personal? And perhaps most importantly, what would be the response from Harry and Meghan themselves? Would they accept the decision, adjust their plans, and proceed cautiously? Or would they confront the situation, challenging the denial and forcing a reconsideration? The answers to these questions would shape the trajectory of the visit, the media coverage, and the international conversations surrounding the royal couple. The royal request, seemingly simple at first glance, had set in motion a chain of events that would test political diplomacy, personal resilience, and the public perception of both government and monarchy. It was the spark in a powder keg of tension, one that would ignite into a series of confrontations, revelations, and controversies that no one could have anticipated. And just as the couple was preparing to face the reality of the Prime Minister's denial, a new development emerged behind the scenes, an unexpected twist that promised to escalate the drama further and challenge everything Harry and Meghan had prepared for. The moment the denial was delivered, the tension in the room was palpable. Harry and Meghan, seasoned by years of public life and media scrutiny, had anticipated challenges, but nothing had prepared them for the bluntness of the Prime Minister's response. "You lie." The words reportedly cut through the air like a scalpel, leaving everyone present momentarily stunned. It was more than a refusal. It was a confrontation, a public assertion of authority that instantly reframed the request from a matter of safety to a matter of conflict. For a couple whose lives were dictated by constant vigilance and measured responses, this was jarring. It was a slap of political reality in a world already heavy with personal and public scrutiny. To understand why the Prime Minister took such a confrontational stance, one must consider the broader political landscape. Governments operate not only through policy and procedure, but through perception. Every decision is a message to the electorate, a signal of priorities and principles. Granting enhanced security to Harry and Meghan, after all, could easily be framed as preferential treatment, an endorsement of celebrity entitlement at the expense of ordinary citizens or domestic priorities. Declining, on the other hand, allowed the government to signal that it treats every individual equally, that no one is above scrutiny, and that public resources are to be carefully managed. Yet the bluntness with which it was delivered went beyond standard administrative refusal. It became, in effect, a statement of confrontation and judgment, a declaration that not only was the request denied, but the motives behind it were being questioned. The emotional impact on the royal couple cannot be overstated. For Harry, the denial struck at the intersection of his personal history and professional responsibilities. From childhood, he had been acutely aware of the dangers inherent in public life. Loss, media intrusion, and previous security lapses had left lasting impressions. To hear a political leader dismiss concerns so directly was, in many ways, a personal affront. Meghan, meanwhile, faced the dual pressures of public scrutiny and the responsibility to advocate for their mutual safety. Both understood that a government's refusal to provide security was not just a logistical problem. It was a potential risk to life and well-being. The stress of the moment was compounded by the need to maintain composure, to project confidence to the public, and to strategize next steps, all while managing the intense emotions bubbling just beneath the surface. Behind closed doors, the royal aides scrambled to mitigate the fallout. They worked feverishly to clarify, negotiate, and explore alternative avenues of protection, attempting to reconcile the Prime Minister's confrontational stance with the practical requirements of the visit. Communication lines buzzed with urgency, advisors weighing the risks of every decision. Was it possible to proceed safely with standard protection? Could local law enforcement compensate for the absence of enhanced measures? Could certain events be altered or canceled without drawing public criticism or media speculation? Every choice carried a potential consequence, and the pressure to act swiftly was immense. Political commentators and media outlets quickly seized upon the story. Headlines splashed across screens. PM snubs royal request. Security denied to Duke and Duchess. You lie. Political confrontation with royals. Social media erupted with debates, speculation, and outrage. Some hailed the Prime Minister for standing firm against perceived royal entitlement. Others condemned the decision as reckless, putting lives at risk for the sake of optics. The global audience, watching with rapt attention, immediately recognized the gravity of the situation. This was no ordinary royal visit. It was a stage upon which political principles, public perception, and personal safety collided. Adding complexity to the situation were the internal dynamics within the Australian government itself. Cabinet members and advisors debated the merits of the denial, weighing public reaction against political risk. Some viewed the Prime Minister's approach as bold, asserting national sovereignty over international celebrity. Others questioned whether the decision had been handled with sufficient tact, noting that a misstep could spark diplomatic tensions and public backlash. The conflicting perspectives created an atmosphere of tension and uncertainty, as decisions that might have seemed simple on paper became fraught with nuance and potential consequence. The public narrative surrounding the denial quickly evolved. Media outlets dissected every angle, seeking insight into the motivations of the Prime Minister, the royal couple, and the advisors caught in the middle. Analysts speculated on whether the confrontation reflected personal animosity, political posturing, or genuine concern over precedent and public perception. Historians weighed in, drawing parallels to previous instances in which governments had confronted or denied requests from high-profile figures. Every layer added complexity, painting a picture of a moment that was as much about politics and image as it was about safety. For Harry and Meghan, the immediate challenge was tactical. How could they proceed with their visit without the security they had requested? How could they maintain visibility, fulfill commitments, and engage with the public while minimizing risk? Every engagement became a potential minefield, requiring split-second decisions and careful coordination with security personnel already under strain. The couple's resilience was tested, not only in terms of physical safety, but also emotional and psychological endurance. Each public appearance carried a heightened sense of exposure, and each interaction became a measure of strategic planning and calculated risk. The consequences of the denial extended beyond immediate logistics. On a personal level, it introduced an element of mistrust between the royal couple and the host government. Negotiations that might otherwise have been routine became contentious, marked by caution and suspicion. On a broader scale, it raised questions about the responsibilities of governments toward visiting dignitaries, particularly when those individuals are globally recognized figures under constant threat. And in the media sphere, the narrative of confrontation fueled speculation, commentary, and increasingly sensational coverage, keeping the story alive and escalating public engagement. Interestingly, the confrontation also highlighted contrasts in leadership styles and cultural expectations. For the Prime Minister, the denial was a calculated act, framed as a demonstration of authority and principle. For Harry and Meghan, it was a disruption, a challenge to their expectations, and a stark reminder that even royalty must navigate the complexities of political power. The clash between these perspectives underscored the tension inherent in such interactions, a delicate balance of diplomacy, security, and public perception, with no easy solutions and very real stakes. Behind the headlines, however, the situation was far from static. Royal aides continued to work, exploring contingency plans, adjusting itineraries, and coordinating with local law enforcement to provide the safest possible environment under the circumstances. The couple, meanwhile, was forced to consider whether to press further, accept the limitations imposed by the government, or adjust their public engagements to minimize risk. Every decision was a negotiation, every movement a strategic calculation, and every interaction with officials a delicate balancing act. At the heart of it all lay a question that no one could answer immediately. What would the Prime Minister do next? The initial denial was dramatic, confrontational, and politically charged, but it was only the beginning. Would the government maintain its stance in the face of public pressure and media scrutiny? Would it reconsider its approach to accommodate the risks faced by the visiting royals? And how would Harry and Meghan respond to a political challenge of this magnitude, balancing diplomacy, safety, and personal agency under global observation? As the royal aides and security teams regrouped to manage the fallout, one thing was clear: this was no ordinary visit, no routine bureaucratic exchange. The confrontation had elevated the situation into a full-blown political and media drama, one that would test relationships, reveal character, and expose the intricate dynamics between celebrity, royalty, and government authority. And as the couple prepared for their next move, a new layer of complication emerged behind the scenes, a development that promised to escalate tensions even further, challenging not only logistics, but the very narrative that had begun to take shape. The moment the royal request was denied, a new reality set in, one that Harry and Meghan could not ignore. It wasn't just a political snub anymore. It was a challenge to their personal safety, a stark reminder that the world outside controlled royal events is unpredictable, even dangerous. Australia, despite its welcoming image and history of hosting royals, had transformed into a pressure cooker of risk and uncertainty. And for Harry and Meghan, who had spent years under the unrelenting gaze of the public eye, this denial meant they had to reassess every step of their itinerary, every engagement, every interaction. From the first day of their arrival, the cracks in the usual security protocol began to show. Crowds gathered more densely than anticipated. Paparazzi pushed beyond previously established boundaries. Fans and critics alike vied for a moment of recognition, sometimes ignoring the invisible lines set for safety. Normally, the presence of additional security personnel acts as a buffer, a controlled zone that mitigates risk. Without that buffer, every handshake, every public appearance, every photo opportunity carried a heightened sense of exposure. For the couple, what should have been a celebratory, ceremonial visit now felt like navigating a gauntlet. One particularly tense moment occurred during a public engagement in Sydney. The couple had been scheduled to attend a community event, interacting with local dignitaries and residents. The crowd was enthusiastic but unpredictable. Children pressed against barricades, tourists jostled for photographs, and aggressive members of the press tried to force closer access. Security personnel, already stretched thin due to the denial of additional resources, scrambled to maintain a protective perimeter. Harry, walking just a few feet ahead of Meghan, noticed a man attempting to breach the line of security. Instinctively, he moved to intercept, shielding Meghan while signaling aides to respond. It was a fleeting moment, barely noticeable to onlookers, but for the couple and their team, it was a stark warning. Without proper support, the risk was tangible, immediate, and unrelenting. Meanwhile, Meghan, attuned to both public perception and personal safety, found herself constantly scanning her surroundings. Every interaction required a mental calculation. Who posed a threat? Who was simply overenthusiastic? Who might be carrying a camera, or worse? The emotional toll of this constant vigilance is difficult to overstate. Most people go through life unaware of these dynamics, navigating their daily routines without considering potential danger at every turn. For Meghan, every smile, every nod, every handshake was a strategic decision. And with the absence of the security measures she and Harry had requested, the stakes were exponentially higher. The media, as expected, did not help matters. Cameras and reporters seemed to appear everywhere simultaneously, capturing every movement, scrutinizing every gesture. Headlines reflected a narrative of tension and uncertainty. Royal couple faces risk amid security denial. Australia's PM challenges royals over protection. Crowd surge as royals navigate safety concerns. Social media amplified the story further, with hashtags trending across platforms and debates erupting in comment sections worldwide. Each post, each video clip, each news article intensified the public's perception of danger, making the couple's situation more visible and more fraught. Even routine logistical considerations became complex operations. Travel between venues had to be meticulously planned, often requiring last-minute route adjustments to avoid overcrowding. Vehicle movements, previously predictable, had to be altered to mitigate risk. Security personnel were forced to operate in a reactive mode, constantly anticipating threats without the reinforcements that the additional security request would have provided. It was a nightmare scenario for anyone in their position, but particularly for two individuals whose lives are lived under continuous surveillance and pressure. What made this period even more harrowing was the psychological weight of the experience. Harry, already attuned to potential threats due to his upbringing and military experience, found himself on edge more than usual. His reactions were instantaneous, hyper-aware of body language, crowd movements, and any deviation from expected patterns. Meghan, balancing composure with vigilance, often felt the tension in every interaction. Together, they had to manage not only their personal responses, but also the optics of grace and confidence in public. It was a high-stakes performance layered with genuine danger, a combination that left even seasoned security teams concerned. Inside their accommodations, discussions between the couple and their aides were intense. Every engagement was reviewed in detail: potential risks, crowd behavior, media presence, alternative exit strategies, and contingency plans. The aides, normally coordinating a standard level of protection, now had to innovate in real time, devising ways to compensate for the lack of formal approval for additional personnel. Each plan was a delicate balance between safety, diplomacy, and public expectation. Failure to adequately protect the couple could have immediate consequences, not only physically, but also politically and reputationally. Interestingly, the denial of security also had unexpected ripple effects on the public's behavior. Some supporters, perceiving the couple as vulnerable, began to follow them more closely, eager to document or even protect their heroes. Others, emboldened by the political controversy, attempted to push boundaries, approaching the couple in ways that would have been mitigated under standard security arrangements. The environment became increasingly unpredictable, with each interaction requiring heightened awareness and split-second decision-making. One of the most telling incidents occurred during a brief public appearance outside a cultural institution. A fan, initially friendly, attempted to move beyond the barricade to approach Meghan. Security personnel, limited in number, could not immediately intervene. Harry reacted instinctively, stepping forward to place himself between Meghan and the approaching individual. The crowd, witnessing the moment, seemed oblivious to the danger, interpreting it instead as a display of charisma or engagement. But for the couple, it was a stark reminder of the vulnerability created by the denial of requested protection. Each day of the visit compounded the stress, testing resilience, patience, and coordination. Behind the scenes, advisors debated the best path forward. Should certain events be canceled or modified to minimize exposure? Could additional support be summoned discreetly without officially contravening the Prime Minister's stance? Every decision was weighed against the dual imperatives of safety and diplomacy. The stakes were unprecedented, and the pressure on the couple and their team was relentless. Failure was not an option, yet every option carried inherent risk. This period also highlighted the broader implications of political decisions on personal safety. Governments have a responsibility to protect visitors under threat, yet political considerations can sometimes conflict with practical needs. The denial of security for Harry and Meghan became a case study in how bureaucratic, political, and media pressures intersect with human vulnerability. It was a situation where leadership, public perception, and personal well-being collided, creating a volatile mix of risk and tension. And while the couple navigated these immediate dangers, the media continued to amplify every incident, every perceived misstep, and every moment of tension. Stories of near breaches, crowd surges, and protective interventions spread quickly, framing the visit as a security nightmare. The narrative fed itself, generating more attention, more scrutiny, and more pressure on both the couple and the Australian government. Public perception became an unpredictable force, influencing the atmosphere of every engagement and every interaction. Amid the chaos, one constant remained: the couple's determination to proceed. Despite the elevated risks, Harry and Meghan maintained a commitment to their public duties, carefully balancing visibility with prudence. Every appearance was carefully choreographed, every gesture intentional, every interaction a calculated risk. Their resilience was tested in real time, highlighting the extraordinary demands placed on public figures living under constant scrutiny and threat. Yet even as they adapted to the security nightmare, a new dimension of tension was emerging. Behind closed doors, political advisors, aides, and security teams were negotiating, strategizing, and preparing for further complications. The initial denial of security was not the end of the story. It was merely the opening salvo in a broader confrontation, one that would continue to escalate in unexpected ways. And just when it seemed that the couple had navigated the worst of the immediate danger, an unforeseen incident occurred. An event that would magnify the risks, challenge their preparations, and set the stage for a confrontation that no one could have anticipated. Almost as soon as the news of the security denial broke, the media descended like a storm, magnifying every detail, interpreting every nuance, and turning what had been a behind-the-scenes political decision into a global spectacle. Headlines splashed across newspapers, online outlets, and television screens. PM snubs royals. You lie. Security denied for Harry and Meghan. Australia confronts the Duke and Duchess. Within minutes, social media platforms erupted, trending hashtags ignited debates, and public opinion formed in real time. The couple, already navigating a tense situation, now faced a second layer of pressure, perception. The world was watching, judging, and speculating. The speed and intensity of the media response created a feedback loop that amplified the drama. Journalists pounced on leaks, aides scrambled to clarify facts, and commentators weighed in with analyses that ranged from supportive to scathingly critical. Every word of the Prime Minister's communication was dissected. Every nuance in Harry and Meghan's reactions was scrutinized. Social media users debated endlessly, some defending the couple's request as reasonable and necessary, others mocking it as entitlement or frivolity. In a digital age where information and misinformation travels instantly, the line between fact and narrative blurred almost immediately. The tabloids, in particular, thrived on this tension. Their coverage was sensational, emphasizing confrontation over context, drama over nuance. One headline described the encounter as a royal showdown with PM, framing the story as if it were a personal feud rather than a complex intersection of safety, politics, and public perception. Another emphasized the words, "You lie," turning a bureaucratic refusal into a dramatic confrontation for maximum emotional impact. These narratives had a way of shaping public opinion before the facts could fully emerge, placing Harry and Meghan at the center of a media storm that seemed to grow with every passing hour. Meanwhile, mainstream outlets attempted a different angle, analyzing the political dimensions of the denial. Reports discussed the Prime Minister's rationale, concerns about optics, public resource allocation, and precedent. Experts weighed in, debating whether the government had acted prudently or recklessly. Royal commentators offered insight into how the couple might interpret and respond to such a confrontation, highlighting the historical context of royal interactions with host nations. Even legal experts chimed in, exploring the implications of denying security to internationally recognized figures under threat. The narrative was sprawling, multidimensional, and relentless. The couple, aware of the media spotlight, faced a difficult balancing act. Every public gesture, every appearance, every statement was now filtered through a lens shaped by prior reporting. They had to maintain composure and dignity while also addressing, or at least managing, the fallout from the headlines. Meghan, in particular, was acutely aware of the double standard often applied to her actions and statements. A slight smile could be framed as arrogance. A simple interaction with a fan could be spun as a breach of protocol. The pressure was unceasing as the media environment turned routine public appearances into high-stakes performances. Irony and contradiction became key elements of the media narrative. On one hand, the coverage highlighted the couple's vulnerability and the perceived recklessness of the government in denying protection. On the other, it questioned the necessity of the request itself, framing it as overcautious or even entitled. Social media commentary mirrored this dichotomy. Some users expressed outrage and sympathy, others expressed skepticism or derision. The rapid oscillation of public opinion created an environment of uncertainty, where the royal couple had to navigate not just physical risk, but reputational and emotional risk as well. The speed of information dissemination added another layer of complexity. Videos from previous visits, photos of crowds, and leaked communications circulated widely, providing context but also creating confusion. Facts were intertwined with speculation, analysis blurred with opinion. The couple's security challenges became a global talking point, prompting debates about media responsibility, political accountability, and public expectations. Every detail was magnified, every misstep scrutinized, every movement interpreted. The media had not only reported on the situation, they had become a participant in it, shaping the narrative as it unfolded. The frenzy also had tangible effects on the couple's day-to-day operations. Security teams now had to account not only for physical threats, but also for media intrusion. Paparazzi strategies had to be anticipated and countered, event timings adjusted to minimize exposure, and public appearances choreographed with precision. The media environment, initially external, became an active factor influencing every decision. It was no longer simply about safety in a crowd. It was about managing the narrative, protecting reputations, and mitigating risks in a world where visibility and vulnerability were inseparable. One particularly telling moment occurred during a scheduled public engagement in Melbourne. A reporter, eager for a sensational quote, approached Meghan while she was greeting local citizens. The camera lens caught her startled reaction, a fleeting but human expression of anxiety. The footage quickly circulated online, framed by outlets as evidence of the couple's vulnerability under government denial of security. In reality, it was a brief, instinctive response to an unpredictable situation. But in the eyes of the media, it became a headline, a narrative, and a talking point. This was the nature of the media storm. Small moments magnified, context stripped away, impact intensified. Amid the frenzy, advisors continued to work diligently behind the scenes, seeking ways to manage perception while maintaining security. They crafted statements, coordinated with sympathetic journalists, and attempted to clarify facts without escalating tensions further. It was a delicate balance. Too much engagement risked feeding the storm, too little risked being drowned out by speculation. Every action, from official press releases to private communications, was measured against the potential for amplification and misinterpretation. The couple's relationship with the media was complicated by history. Previous interactions had already established a pattern of intrusion, misrepresentation, and sometimes outright hostility. Now, with the denial of security, that history became a lens through which every development was interpreted. Headlines implied confrontation where there was caution, tension where there was planning, and personal attacks where there were professional decisions. The result was a constant, high-pressure environment in which the royal couple had to navigate not just the public, but also the narrative being constructed about them in real time. Public reactions mirrored the media narrative. Social media platforms became battlegrounds of opinion. Some users expressed outrage at the government's denial, framing it as reckless or disrespectful. Others criticized Harry and Meghan for perceived entitlement, questioning why they required special treatment. Polls began to reflect the split perception, with public opinion oscillating as new information, images, and commentary emerged. Every day, the couple had to contend with the physical realities of their visit, while simultaneously managing the intangible but no less critical challenge of global perception. And yet, in the midst of this frenzy, one thing remained clear. The media narrative was not merely a reflection of events. It was an active driver of them. Headlines influenced government decisions, shaped public expectations, and even altered the couple's daily movements. The interplay between media, politics, and personal security created a dynamic that was complex, unpredictable, and high stakes. As the visit progressed, the media continued to spotlight each moment, amplifying tension and dramatizing incidents that might have otherwise passed unnoticed. The couple, their aides, and security teams were forced to operate in this environment of constant observation, where every decision had consequences beyond the immediate context. The frenzy was not a side effect. It was part of the reality they had to navigate, adding layers of complexity, emotion, and risk to an already challenging situation. And just when it seemed that the media storm was reaching a predictable rhythm, an unforeseen development occurred. A leak, a misinterpreted interaction, or perhaps a deliberate political maneuver that threatened to intensify scrutiny even further, turning public curiosity into near-obsessive attention. But what came next would take the media frenzy to a level none of them expected, and the fallout would redefine the story entirely. The moment the Prime Minister denied the royal security request, the political landscape shifted almost instantly. What began as a bureaucratic decision had now escalated into a full-blown controversy, rippling through Parliament, opposition parties, and media circles with unprecedented intensity. For the government, what might have seemed a firm demonstration of authority quickly morphed into a political quagmire, revealing fault lines not only between parties, but within the public perception of leadership itself. The denial was no longer just a statement about royal requests. It had become a flashpoint for debate, critique, and potential scandal. Opposition leaders seized the moment, framing the Prime Minister's refusal as reckless and insensitive. In parliamentary sessions, members of the opposition questioned the wisdom of denying security to two individuals whose safety was demonstrably at risk. Was the government prioritizing optics over lives? Could a leader, they asked rhetorically, look at history and ignore the potential consequences of leaving internationally recognized figures underprepared for public exposure? Every question, every comment, every pointed remark was amplified by media coverage, feeding the growing narrative of political miscalculation. Inside the ruling party, the atmosphere was tense and divided. Some ministers praised the decision, lauding the Prime Minister for standing firm and refusing to bow to what they characterized as celebrity privilege. They framed the denial as a principled act, asserting that no individual, regardless of status, should be treated differently when it comes to public resources and national security considerations. Others, however, expressed unease behind closed doors. They recognized the potential risks, diplomatic repercussions, global scrutiny, and the very real possibility that Harry and Meghan might be exposed to danger during public engagements. Their unease was compounded by the immediate and intense media coverage, which made private debates a matter of public speculation almost instantly. Public opinion added another layer of complexity. Polling data, social media metrics, and public commentary revealed a nation divided. Some citizens applauded the government's stance, seeing it as a firm stand against what they perceived as entitlement or political favoritism. Others were appalled, expressing concern that human safety was being compromised for the sake of image and optics. The division was stark, and the intensity of the debate ensured that the story would not fade quietly. Every public appearance, every press briefing, every parliamentary session became a stage upon which the controversy played out, with consequences that extended well beyond the immediate security issue. The opposition's strategy was clear. Amplify the controversy, challenge the government's judgment, and leverage the incident to gain political traction. They highlighted the risks faced by the royal couple, underscoring the tangible dangers inherent in public appearances without enhanced protection. They questioned whether the Prime Minister's actions were appropriate for an international leader, particularly in a nation with deep historical ties to the monarchy. The rhetoric was sharp, designed to provoke reaction and force the ruling party to justify its decision under intense scrutiny. For Harry and Meghan, the political backlash created yet another layer of pressure. They were no longer navigating only physical risk and media frenzy. They were now operating in a politically charged environment where decisions about their safety were subject to partisan debate. Every step, every engagement, every appearance was filtered through a lens shaped by political considerations, making the task of maintaining composure, diplomacy, and public engagement exponentially more difficult. Their aides worked tirelessly to manage schedules, coordinate with sympathetic officials, and mitigate exposure to politically motivated scrutiny, but the challenge was immense. The interplay between political critique and media coverage created a feedback loop that intensified the story. Headlines about parliamentary debates, opposition criticism, and public polling results were circulated alongside images and videos of the couple navigating crowded events. Each new piece of information added fuel to the fire, ensuring that public attention remained high and that the issue could not be easily contained. Political actors leveraged the situation to advance their own narratives, sometimes contradicting one another, sometimes echoing public sentiment, but always amplifying tension. A particularly dramatic moment occurred during a live parliamentary session when an opposition leader directly questioned the Prime Minister about the decision. Cameras captured the exchange in real time, and clips quickly circulated on social media. The language was pointed, the tone confrontational, and the implications significant. If the denial of security was seen as reckless, it could have consequences for public trust, international relations, and even the Prime Minister's political standing. The confrontation was framed in the media as a battle of principles versus pragmatism, a high-stakes narrative that cast the government as either resolute or reckless, depending on the observer's perspective. The ruling party's internal discussions reflected the gravity of the situation. Advisors debated whether to defend the decision publicly, issue clarifying statements, or subtly adjust plans to ensure the couple's safety without admitting fault. Every option carried risk. Over-defending could appear obstinate. Admitting oversight could be seen as weakness, and inaction could escalate criticism further. The political calculus was complex, fraught with implications for leadership, reputation, and public trust. Meanwhile, the royal household watched with concern. The denial and subsequent political fallout were not just about optics. They were about navigating a reality in which decisions made far from the public eye directly affected safety, perception, and the ability to fulfill commitments. The couple had to maintain composure, navigate complex political and media landscapes, and continue their engagements with grace, all while contending with criticism, speculation, and the unpredictable consequences of governmental decisions. Interestingly, the backlash also exposed divisions within Australian society. Media narratives emphasized conflicting perspectives, some framing the Prime Minister as principled, others as reckless. Social media debates mirrored this polarization, with passionate arguments on both sides. Public sentiment became a barometer for political consequences, adding pressure to an already tense environment. In essence, the denial had transformed from a security and diplomatic issue into a multi-layered political crisis, one that encompassed optics, public opinion, and international perception simultaneously. Behind closed doors, efforts continued to mitigate the risk for Harry and Meghan. Security teams devised adaptive strategies, planners adjusted itineraries, and aides coordinated carefully with local officials. Every decision was calculated, balancing safety with visibility, diplomacy with perception. The political backlash made every choice more consequential, highlighting the delicate interplay between public, media, and government scrutiny. Yet, even as the situation unfolded, one thing became clear: the denial of security was not a singular event. It was a catalyst, a spark that ignited debate, scrutiny, and confrontation on multiple fronts. The political backlash had ramifications far beyond Australia. It became part of the international narrative surrounding the couple, influencing media coverage, diplomatic discussion, and the perception of both the government and the monarchy on a global stage. And just when it seemed the political storm had reached its peak, an unexpected ally emerged. Someone within the political or diplomatic sphere whose involvement threatened to shift the narrative yet again, creating new tensions, new calculations, and a fresh set of challenges for both Harry and Meghan. But what came next would escalate the controversy even further, and no one involved could predict the consequences that were about to unfold. As the political backlash intensified and the media frenzy reached a fever pitch, the royal aides found themselves at the center of a logistical and emotional storm. They were the invisible force tasked with protecting Harry and Meghan, not only physically, but reputationally and psychologically. Every decision, every action, and every word mattered. The denial of security had transformed routine planning into a high-stakes operation requiring ingenuity, vigilance, and rapid-fire problem-solving. The first challenge was triage. With the enhanced security measures officially refused, aides had to evaluate every engagement on a granular level. Which public appearances could proceed safely? Which needed modification? Which should be postponed or canceled entirely? The answers were far from straightforward. Crowds that might have been manageable under standard conditions now posed significant risks. Streets previously considered safe were reevaluated. Routes to and from venues were mapped and remapped multiple times. Every scenario was analyzed, every contingency considered, and yet the uncertainty remained omnipresent. One of the aides' most pressing tasks was to manage communication between Harry, Meghan, and Australian authorities. The couple needed to feel supported, reassured, and informed, but the political tension and public scrutiny complicated every interaction. Conversations with local law enforcement required diplomacy and careful wording, balancing the need for cooperation with respect for the Prime Minister's directive. Missteps could be catastrophic, both in terms of safety and optics. Every message was vetted, every instruction confirmed, and every negotiation monitored. At the same time, aides had to manage internal morale. The couple's security team, already stretched thin, faced heightened stress. The absence of additional personnel meant longer hours, constant vigilance, and rapid response decision-making in unpredictable environments. Some team members had to cover multiple posts simultaneously. Others were tasked with shadowing specific events while remaining ready to respond to emergencies anywhere along the route. Coordination became an intricate dance, requiring split-second adjustments and seamless communication under intense pressure. Adding to the complexity was the emotional toll on the aides themselves. They were not just professionals executing a plan. They were human beings aware of the potential dangers. Every crowd surge, every aggressive fan, every sudden shift in public behavior heightened anxiety. The stakes were personal as well as professional. They were responsible for the safety of two individuals under threat, navigating a landscape made more volatile by political confrontation and media amplification. Stress levels were high, tempers occasionally frayed, and moments of doubt emerged despite years of training. Communication with Harry and Meghan was a delicate balance. The aides needed to provide accurate, timely information without alarming the couple unnecessarily. They had to anticipate threats and advise on strategy while ensuring that Harry and Meghan felt agency and confidence in their movements. Every briefing was carefully structured, every recommendation backed by real-time intelligence, and every contingency meticulously rehearsed. The aides effectively became the couple's lifeline, their buffer between public exposure and potential danger. Logistical ingenuity became essential. Where formal security support was denied, aides improvised. Temporary barricades were installed quickly. Alternative routes were scouted on the fly. Volunteer staff were recruited discreetly to supplement coverage.